Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, where we are your weekly guide to crypto-powered change. Nick Mikulewski, Senior Sales Manager here at the Giving Block, and very excited. We have another special guest episode today. So without further ado, very excited to welcome Matt Nash, Executive Director at the Blackbaud Giving Fund, to the podcast. Matt, thanks for joining.
Oh, you're welcome, Nick. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Matt, for those of us maybe who have heard of the organization, I think it's a pretty well-known, brand in the space. But for folks maybe who haven't heard of the organization, can you just give us a quick 30 seconds on you and what the Blackbaud Giving Fund does?
Sure. Well, as you said, I'm the executive director, so I run the Blackbaud Giving Fund. The fund supports workplace giving programs, fund peer-to-peer fundraising, and donation button on charities' websites. In terms of we're a donor advised fund sponsor, so we'll bring all the funds in that these donors that are participating in these various programs give to us, and then we send them out to charities all over the world. And so, in a typical year, we'll send funds to about 130,000 charities in the U.S. and in about 90 countries.
Got it. Yeah. And, you all are sort of at the forefront of a lot of, giving trends and behaviors. How's 2025, been starting from your vantage point?
Well, I think it's been starting at a fairly high amount because I think there was a lot of giving going on last year, like the tail end of last year. And then as obviously the uncertainty that's come into the markets and things have occurred, things have slowed down a bit. So we're all kind of, as everybody is, watching the news each day to see what kind of stability will come back. And when that happens, I think things will take off again.
Yeah. And, you know, the Blackbaud Giving Fund, Just Giving, the Giving Block, we've all kind of partnered here together. So can you also just kind of tie the dots there? Maybe less so on the Giving Block side. We'll get to that in a little bit, but the relationship between Blackbaud Giving Fund and Just Giving and how those organizations work together.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So there's two organizations in Blackbaud that we're really tied tightly together with. Well, Just Giving is the one that I consider to be more like the retail approach of getting funds, because peer-to-peer fundraising is really a individual to individual donor kind of activity. And what we do is we support all of the giving that occurs through Just Giving in those vehicles in the United States. Just Giving is a UK based company. They deal with they have a whole large business in the United Kingdom. But what we do is, because we're a U.S. based donor advised fund, we have access to the 1.4 million charities in America that we can disperse to through what Just Giving does in their peer-to-peer fundraising, and also on the donate checkout processes that are on the nonprofit websites.
Yeah, and as this world has kind of between the digital side and the traditional side has continued to blur and get closer together over the prevailing years. We've all sort of like joined forces and collaborated. I'm curious, did you have any kind of crypto expertise or exposure in previous years, or how did you even get kind of
Yeah,
into the
right,
space?
right. How did I get pulled into this? Well, I'm not an expert in crypto, but I've actually been involved with it since 2015. I used to be at Fidelity Charitable, and Fidelity Charitable was one of the first donor advised funds. I think it was the first donor advised fund that began taking in crypto, and we were involved with setting up, at that time, trying to create a process, because people like you didn't exist at that time. But the idea was pretty similar. We bring crypto in, have it's sold on a marketplace, and turned into cash so that the nonprofit can receive cash. And I know for that organization, it's been a very successful program over the years. Even though when we kicked it off in 2015, it was at one of those dips that occur in crypto, and it was a little bit slow at first. But yeah, one has to be patient when you do new things, right?
Well, I mean, for folks in the crypto space, everybody certainly knows the Fidelity name and brand. I mean, Fidelity Digital Assets, one of the sort of crypto OGs in the space. I know it's sort of a sort of sister department to the wider Fidelity brand, but no, I'm sure it must have been a really interesting, time to get started, and very interesting that you've been in the space a while. That's really those are some impressive credentials to have been working in the crypto ecosystem, and from 2015 to today, like 10 years. I mean,
It's a
that's almost like a
long time.
century in the
Yeah,
real
right,
world.
right, exactly.
Well, I'm always curious, as the crypto conversation kind of comes up in the circles that you're talking in, what are some of the, you know, entry points that nonprofits are talking to you about, or how do you sort of explain and sort of start demystifying, crypto in general? Because sometimes that name initially just kind of gives people a little bit of trepidation, like it's too exotic.
Yeah, right. Well, I always say it's we got to remove the perception of fear around it, just because people don't understand it. Typically, think in terms of risk and volatility, especially if you're running a nonprofit, or more importantly, if you're on a board of a nonprofit, because that you have to get it past any kind of new kind of activity, you have to get past the board. I start with who owns crypto. And when you do that, you realize that the Gen Z and millennials, it's something like what was it, 42% of millennials and 37% of Gen Z, or it might be the other way around, own crypto. And if you just calculate the numbers, that's like 56 million people in America, and they're younger. All right, and nonprofits are struggling trying to just break away from their standard, tried and true long-term donors to get at the more young donor base. And so, to me, the important thing here is there's a lot of people in America that are younger. They have an asset that is highly appreciated. And, as long as I've been in philanthropy, the whole key is the number one asset you want to give is something that's appreciated. And so to me, that's what creates the utility and the interest and the desire to go to cryptocurrency as a donation platform.
Yeah,
And we
and
saw it last year with like $1 billion in 2024. You guys are in it big time, and you see it every day with what's happening.
yeah, and I just want to kind of double click on some of the, I don't know, maybe call it like stumbling blocks or barriers. Where do you see people getting kind of tripped up the most, or what are some of those common like I would say like objections when this is being discussed? And interestingly enough, in some of the conversations that I have, and I don't know maybe if this is something that you experience. Um, Putting aside the donor that's reached out, made either the general inquiry or has decided to say, hey, I'm going to reach out to you guys because I'm really motivated to try to offset some gains, can you take this asset, yes or no? um, Interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of the genesis of conversations with nonprofits I've been talking to coming from the board that's saying, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere. We should probably take a more serious look at this. So I guess, at the sake of trying to maybe not weave a too complicated two-part question, again, what are some of the initial stumbling blocks that you most often hear, and um, what do you think about the fact that where we're seeing things come in is actually from the board level?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I think that the key stumbling block comes from lack of knowledge about how crypto works, and lack of knowledge about how you can bring it into your charity. And what I've seen is it's based on a perception of risk. So the volatility, people think, oh my God, this thing goes up and it goes down, and you just need to know how to manage that. And that's what I like about the work that we did with JustGiving and the Giving Block, because the process takes away a lot of that risk, right? It comes in. It's easy for the donor to do. First of all, the nonprofit knows who the donor is because the donor identifies himself. So now you're taking out that risk, because a big risk with any kind of money movement is if you don't know who the customer is, it's a risk. And then you go through a checkout process that you're holding true to a market rate that is guaranteed until you get through the process, as long as you stay within the window that you've defined. And so it sort of lowers nervousness about, well, wait a minute, what am I doing here? I'm really not taking in a very volatile asset. I'm simply transacting and doing it in a way that turns it into cash. So the nonprofit now is receiving cash to fund their operations. They're not receiving an asset that has ups and downs to it. That then they have to determine, well, how much of this am I going to hold in order to support my operations?
Yeah, and I would say that that's certainly, um, the a very common part of the call where we're talking to CFOs or heads of finance, where there's a hope that is can this be converted to cash, or it's the so this is, I guess, very similar to when we accept gifts of stock.
Stock, exactly.
Same kind of thing. And so, all right, well, we've been doing stock for the last few decades. That doesn't seem necessarily that scary at all if this asset is just converted to cash. And sometimes it's interesting with the volatility. This asset going up and down. It's actually sometimes I call it sort of like a feature, not a bug. It's kind of great that you have all this volatility. It makes the giving opportunities very frequent, and something that can be quite advantageous for both a donor and a nonprofit.
And on the donor side, what I think is great, and so we talked about the Gen Z and the millennials that own this, they're not tend to be experienced donors yet, right? So now they're holding an asset they might not even think about as being something that could be donated. So, but if they go to try to sell it and then support their charity, then it's going to be a huge tax problem for them. They'll learn that quickly. But the key is, I think they need to understand of saying, hey, do you know that you've got assets that you could be giving to charity that um, would be really beneficial, and it doesn't harm you at all. In fact, it really helps you because you've got this market rate of this stock or this currency that you bought a long time ago that was a lot smaller, and now it's worth a lot more, and you can help the charity out. And these people are pretty socially aware, and they want to help different organizations and make the world a better place. And what a great way to do it! They just need to know that they can do it with crypto.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that education on the donor side, as well as extremely critical. And like you said, a lot of organizations are quickly realizing that, that donor that has typically been giving, you know, 200, 500, whatever it might be, that young donor is quickly realizing, when I realize some of these profits, actually have a substantial appreciation in this portfolio. Um, when I
two hundred
take these
dollars turns into $2,000.
Exactly, and I realize I'm gonna be taking these profits because I'm gonna use those funds for whatever I wanna use it for, and, geez, I actually have a pretty hefty tax bill. Instead of giving you that regular 200 that I normally would, I'm happy to give you that $1,000, because it is within my interest to do that, and great, I'm doing even more for this organization that I already love to support.
Right, and you probably didn't have a targeted use for that $2,000 worth of crypto before, because if you sold it, it would take a big hit out
Yeah, exactly right.
of what
I
you
think it's
sold.
I think it's interesting too with the fact that you've got the introduction of these new ETFs, and the fact that these professional platforms, wealth management institutions, brokerages are going to be bringing a lot of this education into the space, not only for regular investors, but I think some of that tax education is going to be filtering out into, the marketplace as well. How do you sort of see that playing out?
I would see it playing out the same way it took for stock to be so popular a gift. That went on for years, trying to convince people that, hey, the best way to give is to give stock, or now in like the last maybe 5 or 6 years, qualified retirement distributions also is another one of those, right? Where all of a sudden you have something it's been growing for 40 years, and now you're going to get taxed on it if you use the money, but if you give it away, there's no tax on it. It takes a long time. And what we did in the early days was we educated the advisors, because a lot of the advisors would be helping these donors with their funds. The newer, the younger folks coming in, they may not have advisors yet, so we have to just make sure that they see that this is a donation that they can give, and it's easy to do, and it will be a natural part of what they do in the future once they've done it a couple times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's kind of go down that route a little bit. I mean, looking at, what we're doing together between Blackbaud and Just Giving and the Giving Block, um, do you have some, key benefits again to kind of just like sort of summarize for nonprofits, kind of like the opportunity here, integrating crypto alongside those traditional giving options?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the simplest benefit that they've got is if they just go on to Just Giving and register, then automatically they can accept crypto. They don't have to do anything. Literally, it's just a button that shows up, and it can come in. Um, and I think that's a great solution here. And then they can explain to donors that it's a very simple and safe process, and backed by a couple of organizations that have been doing these transactions for a long time, and it's their expertise. So you can pull together the components where the nonprofit gets comfortable with it, and once they do, then they should tell the donors, hey, we accept crypto now. It's very easy to do. Just go here and click on it, and here's what's happening behind the scenes, and here's what's happening to your tax situation, so that the donor knows that it's a safe asset to come in and give and use to move causes forward that they want to move forward on.
Yeah, and if you've reached this point in the recording, I'm gonna tell folks we're gonna have all the relevant, links in the show notes. So if you want to flip that switch, we'll make sure you know exactly where to go, to do that. And I guess, I guess maybe looking ahead at 2025, we talked a little bit about kind of like sort of how the year's kind of started, but anything you're really excited about, and it could be crypto related or just nonprofit related, something coming down the pike in 2025, or something you're hoping to see in the space.
Yeah, well, we're talking about digital giving, and digital giving in the last few years has just exploded. The number of platforms that I run into on a weekly basis, I find a new one almost every week of some new organization that's got a new platform. Most of them work very well. The problem is that nonprofits are now having to deal with a plethora of these things. In terms of, like I just said, simply all you have to do is sign up for Just Giving. Well, if 50 people come to a nonprofit and say all you have to do is sign up, suddenly it becomes a big project for the nonprofits to handle that. So what I see is that as nonprofits get used to doing this, and the platforms get better at bringing the funds in along with the information that the nonprofit needs, and it populated in the nonprofits databases so they can steward those donors, then I think it's going to really take off. Because right now, there's what happens at the nonprofit level is they're judging every minute of every day, how much energy and time do I spend trying to pull in this type of donor or this type of fund versus what do I think I'm going to get out of it. And if that equation is out of balance, then they're not going to go pursue it. But as it gets better and better, and as the value comes in by the information sharing that occurs, that gets all the way and gets embedded into the nonprofit systems, then they're not spending as much time and energy on it, and then they can spend their time stewarding the donors, which is what they really want to do to get the true value out of it. That's when I think this stuff will really take off. And that's, then on top, what you do is crypto is one of those assets, stock is one of those assets, qualified distributions is one of those components, cash is another one. All those can come together, but it helps if the system that they're working with is working properly, and that they don't have to worry about the multitudes of these systems that they're dealing with.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And um in the conversations that we have with nonprofits, and just getting comfortable in putting that alongside all of the other ways to give, we're started to see this asset, in terms of crypto, like really maturing. We're expecting to see this being a very big year. 2024 for the giving block was our biggest year on record. Market conditions are looking like 2025 is going to be a pretty large year. And we've started, the first quarter of this calendar year seeing a level of giving that's somewhat been on par with what we historically had seen around Q4. And I think it's just
Wow.
really an expansion of the penetration of this into more and more donors' portfolios. Some of that increased education and organizations looking for those new channels. What are some ways that we can grow some additional revenue channels without adding overhead? And how do we acquire
Mhm.
these donors at a lower cost? Like you said, like flipping a switch, adding a new door. I mean, these seems like really great options for organizations trying to navigate things in this climate.
You're probably beginning to see the impact of the overall growth of just crypto in general. So as that got more popular over year after year after year, now as people start thinking about giving, and then as they learn about it, they see it's pretty easy to do. It's a pleasurable experience. You get, yeah, a warm glow feeling from doing it, and you have some assets that you can actually help somebody out with. As that grows, it's contagious, right? And
Yeah.
it's a contagion in a good term instead of a bad term.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. As we kind of round things out, want to, you know, sort of give you the floor a little bit. And if there's anything I've not asked about or something you really want to make sure people know about, the giving fund, just giving, the opportunity that's in front of people, want to give you the floor.
Well, thank you. Well, what I would start with is what I began the conversation with, which is you've got younger donors who have this currency, and it's highly appreciated. And I think that's a great opportunity to go after and build your donor base beyond the older donors that are traditionally the ones that have stuck with nonprofits for a long time. And the ability to do it using these technical tools like JustGiving has, and the Giving Block has, and the trading partner that you use, make it so simple that a nonprofit doesn't have to be an expert in crypto. And once you get comfortable with that, then all you need to do is to understand that here's how the risks are controlled, here's how the process is controlled, and it's set up to really help feed the basic components of a nonprofit, which is operating expenses to run their operation. And so I think it's a fantastic opportunity. And I've always been a fan of anything that's appreciated asset is a great thing to give, and crypto is way up there with that. And I just would encourage donors to think about giving their crypto. I would encourage nonprofits to create ways like what we've done to accept it. And now there's simple ways for them to do that, and they should jump in and get going because there's nothing but upside for the future for it.
I love that. It's a perfect place to kind of wrap things up. And, for folks that are interested in taking that first step off the sidelines, and if they want to learn a little bit more about you and the organization, how can people get in touch with you? Where should they go?
Well, on our website, the blackbaudgivingfund.org, we have a blog, and we wrote a specific blog article about this topic. It's actually, I looked today, it's the fourth one down on the list. And go ahead and click on it, and it actually gives you the ability to go to the URLs that I mentioned to allow you to sign up and register for this thing. So it's a pretty easy way to get yourself up to speed and then see the components of where you have to actually go to sign up.
All right, fantastic. Well, for those of you who have made it this far in the show, if you're a donor, as Matt said, please consider donating some of that appreciated crypto to your favorite charitable causes. And if you're a nonprofit, some really easy steps to get started, even if you're just the slightest bit curious on what this crypto thing is. A lot easier and less complicated that you might think. We'll include all of those links in the show notes, so it's really easy to just grab the resources so you can do your own research and take some findings back to your team. On behalf of the entire Giving Block team, Matt, thank you so much for joining. And for everybody else, we'll see you next week.